they become addicted to spending money, and they just can't stop. And when they run out, they will go to the most creative endeavors to figure out how to get more money to spend. They'll get more money from us, they will borrow it, they'll print more money, they'll do whatever necessary. And it's putting us in a tremendous danger. The German Republic, in the days before Hitler, they spent so much money because, or they had to print up so much money because we were making them pay reparations after the war. They had to come up with the money somehow, so they just started printing it. And they printed so much that they had tremendous bills equal to 1 trillion marks or something like that. And it took a wheelbarrow of money to go to the local grocery store to buy a loaf of bread. And eventually it collapsed entirely. Now, we don't want that to happen to our country. We want to do something to change things around so we don't wind up like Germany did, where they had a total collapse and you had to have a wheelbarrow full of money to go buy groceries. And when they got paid, it was interesting, when they got paid, they had to go shopping immediately afterwards because if they waited a couple hours, their money was actually worth less. That's how fast it began to deteriorate. That shows us what can happen. And we don't want this to happen, and the majority of the people do not want this to happen and are willing to do what is necessary to prevent it from happening. Yet Congress has, the members of Congress supposedly have a lot better knowledge of history than the average person. And most of them are aware of this danger. But, you know, when you're addicted to something, if you're addicted to alcohol and you're aware of the problems, you still drink even if you're aware of the problems. And this is the problem with Congress. They overspend even though they're aware of the problem it's creating. They still do it because they're addicted to it. So we the people, we the majority of the people have to step in and save Congress from themselves. And how are we going to do this? I'm going to talk about this in the future, but I want to present a few more reasons why the situation we're in is such a problem and goes against the will of the majority of the people. There's quite a few things that go against the majority will. Let me just cover a couple of them. The first that I've been talking about is that they overspend and they're addicted to their overspending. Another big problem that goes against the majority will is the border security. By far, the polls show the vast majority want the border taken care of in some way. Much better than it is. Second is healthcare reform. Now, healthcare reform is an interesting one, and the fact that the healthcare bill was passed on the idea of saying the majority of the people want healthcare reform, therefore they support this bill. Well, that was somewhat of a deception, because it's true, the majority of the people did want healthcare reform. But the polls showed something different when they were asked, do you want this particular health care reform? The majority always said no. And now that it's passed, around 63% of the people want it repealed. So a majority of the people still want health care reform, but they don't want the 2,500 pages that nobody knows yet what is in it. Have you heard anyone explain to you what's in those 2,500 pages? Have you heard any explanation yet that covers more than one page? Yeah, I think we, the public, on TV have had about one page of explanation as to what's in that 2,500 bill. So what's in the extra 2,499 pages that nobody has been told of yet? What's in those 2,499 pages? We don't know. That's why the public is against this, because we don't know what is in it yet. Okay, wasteful spending is another one in earmarks. The majority of the people is against earmarks, yet they just keep on coming through. And the majority is ignored in this aspect. Another thing the majority of the people are against is using the Social Security surplus for other things. During the Vietnam War, the Social Security surplus was blended with the general fund, so Congress could take the surplus from the Social Security and just spend it however they wanted. And they've been doing that ever since. Now, if the surplus, if the whole Social Security taxes were left in the one fund, then we'd have a surplus today, and the Social Security recipients would have no problem. I mean, we'd have a nice little cushion there based on all that surplus. But it's not there anymore, and it will not be long that before there will not be any surplus dollars available for Congress to even borrow. So the majority is pretty upset about that once they realize it. Okay, we're overtaxed. The majority of the people, especially the taxpayers, feel we're overtaxed. Even a lot of people that don't pay federal taxes feel we're overtaxed. There's about pretty close to 50% of the people in our country do not pay any federal income taxes. Yet over 50% of the people feel we're overtaxed. So that means a lot of people that pay no federal income tax even feels we're overtaxed. Another thing the majority want, they want less dependency on foreign oil. Now there's a number of ways we can go about doing this, and we aren't doing any of them right. But the majority will really strongly desires for us to be more independent energy-wise. And we're not doing very much to get in that direction. Another thing the majority want is they would like our Congress people to have term limits. Yet they have resisted. Why have they resisted? Well, because once you get power and get in power, you don't want to relinquish the power. So the people that have to cooperate with any voting and legislation to do away with term limits are those who will not benefit from it, at least in their minds. They will lose power, and so they're not going to vote themselves out of power. So as long as we leave it up to Congress, we're not going to get term limits. It was interesting that the term limits that do apply in our country is to the presidency, and before FDR came into power, we didn't have them. And then FDR served 4 terms. And even though most of the country thought he was a pretty good president, they felt that, 4 terms is just too many, even for a good president. And they were right. And the same thing should apply to Congress. Even if we get some fairly decent Congress people in there, it doesn't do any harm to release them, because if we're releasing the good ones, we're also releasing the bad ones. And so it's a good idea to get fresh blood in Congress now and then through term limits. And the majority certainly would support something like this.